June 28th. This is the Public Safety Committee, Los Angeles City Council. Councilman Smith, Chairman, joined by Councilman Cardenas and Councilman Zine. Gives us a quorum. So we will begin. If there's no objection to the committee, we'll take items 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 as consent items.
So moved.
So moved.
Wait a second. 13. Which ones again? 5?
5, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. 12 and 13 are graffiti awards. 9 and 10 were 10, 11 were contributions.
5. Okay.
We're good? All right.
Yep.
So those items will be by consent. If anyone's here on those items, you're free to go. We won't sneak any attack on you and bring them up later. Thank you very much. We'll go then to item number 1. I believe the police department has some recommended changes on item number 1.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Richard T. Fank, Executive Director of the Board of Police Commissioners. A recommendation that I would make to the committee is that the way the ordinance is currently constructed, each year when we do a reassessment of the fees, and if they are to go up or down, we would have to come back each year to adjust this scheme that we have come up with a 50% for the first 89 days of being late, and then 100% for the second, for 90 days and later. That was based on the original original permit fee of $30 when we went to council. As a result of the budget process, our fees were submitted, and the city attorney is now working on a report which will increase the permit fee to $53. So what I would recommend is in the draft ordinance, section 1, that would be a 50% of the annual permit fee, and then in section 2 would be 100% of the permit fee. Therefore, we wouldn't have to come back each year, as that would adjust. Revenues under this scheme would be based on our 2009 registrations that were late, is approximately additional $200,000.
So rather than adjusting twice every time, we adjust once, and it automatically kicks.
That would be my recommendation.
So where it says 15 and 15 in the two parts, 1 and sub 1, and then 30 and sub 2, that would be changed to 50% and 100%.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Any questions from members?
The recommendation to increase it, the alarm fee was originally $30.
Yes, sir. And the report from the city attorney's office is being drafted now, the ordinance to come to committee, and that recommendation was for $53 based on a reassessment of the amount of time it takes to do the processing of the fee, the permit. So the city attorney's office will be bringing that forward to committee. The recommendation is, again, to take away having to come back each time to adjust this to be 50% and 100%.
With a 53 from the 30, just to have the permit, that's what it's going to cost the subscriber.
Yes, sir.
Have we clarified the permit is required by the installer, or the installer somehow has to make reasonable attempts so the consumer doesn't have to go through the cumbersome process? Have we certified that
Yes,
process?
sir. That process is in ordinance and is working, and I would say, based on the feedback we're receiving, it's working quite well. The issues that we're finding are for those individuals who have never had a permit and they get a false alarm. That's when we find out they don't have a permit. They receive a billing of $100 additional penalty because they do not have a permit when they have a false alarm, and then we get them into the permit cycle that way.
But the alarm companies, because most consumers don't install their own alarms, they contract with some company to install, and then sometimes
correct.
monitoring. It's now an ordinance that company is responsible,
That's
or is it
correct.
still the consumer that owns the residence?
The alarm company is responsible for installing, prior to installing an alarm, that they must have a viable permit.
Okay, have we done any audits to make sure they're compliant with that?
As we are receiving false alarms on new alarms that have been installed, we're doing that, and I would say we're about 80% of the new alarms that are installed. What we're finding is alarms that were installed for years and person never had a permit, that's the ones that we're finding that have never had a permit. But the current process, I would say we're about 80% compliant.
Now, what do we do about the 20% of installations by companies that aren't compliant?
We're dealing with those companies individually as they come to our attention, and they typically are the smaller companies. They are not the larger companies such as ADT, et cetera,
Right.
who have a process in place. It's the smaller companies that either say they aren't aware of it, but we're dealing with them individually as we find out.
So we should have 100% compliance.
Absolutely, we should.
When you buy a car, that dealer's responsible to register that, and then you get the tags in the mail. We need to do the same process.
I agree. The difficulty we have is if I buy an alarm and I don't have a permit, and that alarm doesn't go all false for 3 years,
Right.
for 3 years, we're not going to know about that.
Right. But most people don't install their own. They have a company do it.
That's
And
correct.
those companies are required by law to get that permit.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Is there anything in this ordinance that allows us, like we do on business taxes and others, to go back 3 years and collect? If you
Morning,
find
sir.
somebody that hadn't paid for...
Deputy City Attorney Brian Satelli. This particular ordinance does not speak to that. However, I think there are provisions within the municipal code that provide for entities to do that. Generally. However, and there may be some statute of limitation issues as to tolling. However, I'm not prepared to discuss that.
Would you do us a favor if we move this forward, which I'm sure we will, that you report back when it comes up to council and look to see if there's a look-back provision that would overwrite this and give us the ability to go back 3 years on people that have not paid for years? Because there's a lot of people that were under the grandfather, basically. They've been in the system a long time before the new ordinance came about, that we may be able to go back and catch them on that. So it might be a provision we need to add back in, the one sentence in here that's, but I know Office of Finance does that regularly on all of our business taxes and things like that. So DWP does it. It's a standard provision on collection of fees.
Yeah. I know, Chairman, that Office of Finance typically will send the letters out to the permittees as to delinquencies. So typically they handle that aspect of the collection.
We'll see if they're handling that portion of it then. We appreciate that.
And where does this money go?
General fund, sir?
General fund?
Yes, sir. All of the fee revenue goes to the general fund.
And the 53 is the cost of the department to process those applications?
Yes, sir. Office of Finance and the department to process, because your initial application is made to Office of Finance, they have a process they go through. It comes to Commission Investigation Division, we have a process we go through, and again, taking the current salaries, benefit rate, et cetera, time and motion, the study came up with the $53 for the current process.
Is there a particular Woodland Hills firm that you want to check on?
Check on them all.
Check on them all, okay.
Pay your fair share.
Thank you, Rich. And for the audio record, we've been joined by Ms. Perry. Ms. Perry, do you have any questions? No. Okay, that moves forward with the recommended changes. Thank you very much, and
Thank you, sir.
we'll hear back on council on that other point then. Item number 2.
John White, City Clerk. Item 2, City Attorney Report and Ordinance amending the LAMC to increase asbestos abatement permit fees for residential and other occupancies.
Janet Jackson, Los Angeles City Attorney's Office.
Mark Storms, Assistant Fire Marshal.
Okay, we have before us an ordinance on asbestos collection fees. How does this compare to other cities in the area?
As far as other cities, we've fallen behind. We haven't adjusted our fees for asbestos inspections for over 14 years.
14 years.
And what we were doing originally was the asbestos was primarily the issue we dealt with in high-rise buildings. And now that the high-rises have caught up and we've moved into the new era of high-rises, we're going into tenant occupancy changes in smaller buildings. And we're trying to move the fee structure out of the high-rise unit and into the regular day-to-day new construction and tenant improvements. Because before it was partially supported by the fees that were generated out of the high-rise unit for high-rise regular inspections.
Okay. Do you know if this was budgeted, this increase was budgeted in this year's budget, next year's budget?
It was,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
it was. We
So-
were trying to get this to support the one inspector's salary.
Okay.
Yes.
So it was for a full year's funding, though, at this increased amount?
It would, the intent is it probably will not be 100% fee supported
Yeah.
because of the slowdown in construction. I think we're down about want to say about 40% from last year because of the slowdown and the other cuts that have taken place in new construction. This will be, to say that it's going to be 100% fee supported would probably be overly optimistic because of the slowdown.
But you're moving closer toward it.
Right.
All right, that's good. And last thing is just a concern I have on the landfill site. When people don't call us and request an inspection, do we have the inspectors at Sunshine Canyon, which is our main landfill for the city of LA, if they were to catch somebody, do they notify you, or is it just a hazmat call out, or?
Well, I believe that would, and I would, speculation on my part, AQMD is involved with all asbestos, permitted asbestos removal. We take over in residentials over 4 units and commercials to make sure that the life safety issues are protected. As far as essentially illegal dumping of asbestos materials, I would assume that AQMD would have a dog in that fight, and I'm not sure of waste management and Bureau of Sanitation's policies relative to that.
Yeah, well, they may not know it, but I think that at the landfill site of it, where we have an inspector that the city has there that's empowered to act on AQMD issues, I just want to make sure if we're catching somebody that we go back and get fees as well, because it's going to be an illegal dump.
Right. If
ends up in the
it's an
landfill.
illegal operation, I would assume that we would be contacted as part of the investigation done by that agency,
Yeah.
and we would have records of all permitted asbestos removal in the city.
Could you check for me to see if they find it in a landfill, anything ends up in a landfill is illegally dumped? Because that stuff doesn't go to the Class 3 landfill. So if it is found there, I would assume they call your hazmat out. Would you check that for me?
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Will
And
do.
if not, we'll tighten it up at the landfill side of things where we have an SEA. All right, any
That would be
questions?
landfill relative to illegal dumping.
Illegal dumping, yeah. Now, what's dumped on the streets illegally, you're never going to catch them probably. So that I'm not worried about. But those that end up in a landfill, that some guy drives on a pickup truck that he took out of a facility and dumps, I want to make sure we're getting those people. So,
Yes, sir.
any questions?
No.
None? Okay, thank you very much. I'll move forward with approval of the committee. Takes us to item number
Thank you.
3.
Item 3, motion Zion Cardenas instructing the fire department to report relative to its accounting system for tracking brush clearance and other liens assessed by the department, and recommendations for improving the system to clearly note all pending liens on a property's chain of title.
Mr. Zine, this is your motions. I'll let you lead the discussion. We do have 2 cards from the public.
Thank you. Let's hear from the public first, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, cards from the public then would be Dr. Clyde Williams. Come forward. And Charsky, I'm sorry, I can't read the first name. Charsky, yes. First name is Christie.
Good morning, Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. Here we go again, brush clearance. I've noted it on several occasions to the Fire Commission, and it's still a mess. Basic questions. How do we know which lots need clearance or not? We have the most stringent fire brush clearance requirements in the United States. However, we still have fire. Just last week, or about 10 days ago, we had a brush fire, grass fire, on Ascot Hill in El Sereno. Why? If things are in compliance. So, no cost assignment. What's the cost on this? We have roughly 100,000 lots that get notices. Is it paid for? The notices? Is all of the stuff paid for? Most importantly, is there a redeployment of equipment and personnel in regard to the brush season? Yeah, from what I've heard, but I've never been able to find a plan of it or the report regarding the modified deployment program. I've had a couple maps showing, okay, these are the ones to be redeployed. However, what's the basic problem? The computer system is ancient, and in fact, today, there was an issue out on the blog saying the new LAFD site sucks and is less informative than the old one. However, We can't even get our brush inspection, self-inspection summations in by email. And we can't communicate with the LA Fire Department staff by email. We have to do a fax. And this year, I think it's a little archaic. I would recommend that there be a specific site established for brush clearance, that you need to streamline the whole system a great deal because most people can't understand the notices that come out, and provide, like you do, graffiti, a whistleblower's incentive. $1,000. Hey, that's pretty good. I like that idea. Because what do we have at risk? People. And property. And nature. Because most of them are in CD 1, 2, 5, 11, 13, 14. It's citywide. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the record, I have seen the deployment plan for red flag days and those summer days, and it is there, believe me. And
Last year, I submitted 40 sites that did not meet.
I was answering a different question, so go ahead. Chris?
Good morning. My name is Christy Bliharski. I am Vice Chair of the Woodland Hills Warner Center Neighborhood Council. I'm also a board member on the Woodland Hills Homeowners Organization. I'm here today speaking just for myself, though, and also to put a face on this particular issue here, and I'd like to thank Councilman Zine and his staff for bringing this motion forward. The Los Angeles Fire Department Accounting Department has been filing the liens that are assessed to property owners who fail to clear their brush from what I've discovered is a little bit of an obscure way, so that when a chain of title is pulled on a particular property, the lien that is pending does not show. So what's happening here is that if the house is sold during this time that the lien is pending, but before it shows up on the next year's property tax bill, the lien is not being discovered in escrow. And so therefore, the new property owner, the new buyer, gets hit with a surprise in the mail when the property tax bill comes the following year, and it creates a big, big mess because this falls on the shoulder of the innocent new home buyer. This happened to me and my husband, and fortunately we had a title company that took responsibility and did take care of it for us after numerous hours of stress and research on my part. I did discover through speaking with people in the accounting department and the fire department that this happens to numerous homeowners every year, and I spoke to one, I believe it was a captain within the fire department, who told me he gets over a dozen calls like mine every year. So correcting this system so that these liens show up on the property's chain of title will not only help the new home buyers from being stuck with the responsibility of these liens, but it will also help the city be able to collect these fees and these liens in a timely manner. It could be tens of thousands of dollars a year that it's just sort of floating there. And if these liens are discovered during escrow, then the city will get their money in a more timely manner, and the responsible party will also be responsible for paying their lien, the actual person who failed to clear the brush. So thank you very much.
Mr. Harsky, appreciate very much for bringing this forward to us. And Chief, you may choose to, if you wish, to answer Mr. Williams' comments. They weren't on this motion, but if you wish, you may. Otherwise, Mr. Zine?
Like yourself, I have seen the deployment plan. It is there. It's reanalyzed every year. It's published every July, and it's our operational plan for brush deployments.
Yeah. And you pre-deploy equipment to Station 88 and other stations in the high brush areas?
Basically, what we do is we move metro resources into the valley areas, into the brush areas. The plan is driven by the weather, which is done daily out of the Division 3 office.
Yeah. And the chief has the authority to ignore the MCP when those conditions arise?
The MCP was designed with the intent of the ability to shut it off and fully activate all closed resources with a phone call and a teletype notice that goes to 19 different agencies out of the Division 3 headquarters.
Thank you.
It can be reactivated for the next morning.
Okay. Anything else?
Just a small correction. The number of parcels in the very high fire severity zone, it currently is 132,000, not 100,000.
And of the 132,000, how many get notices?
All
132.
parcels.
And we end up with how many disputes here in the council from the 132,000? It's a couple dozen, I think. Generally 50.
This is Captain Rob Knight. He's the commander of the brush clearance unit.
Good morning. I'm Robert Knight, Captain of Brush Clearance Unit. Approximately once we get to the point of appealing the assessment charges, when we get to Public Safety Committee, we're probably about a dozen, maybe a little more. 15, I think, is the most I've seen out of 132,000.
Yeah, and the 132,000 are cleared,
That's correct.
to the satisfaction of the ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
One issue, sir, that was brought up earlier this morning is that average we violate about 12,000 parcels within that area. Most are complied and eventually come into compliance. What we've noticed, and the information brought forward by Captain Knight to me, was that we're seeing he's at about 18,000, which is about a 50% increase. The majority of that is due to issues relative to property ownership, as well as people walking away from their properties, and conversely walking away from the brush issue, which is going to impact us in how much we've budgeted to do this brush clearance through our contractors.
Out of that 6,000 increase, how many of them are public agencies? Because I know some public agencies have notified us they're not going to do their job this year.
That 18,000 is all private.
All private.
That's all private, yes.
Doesn't include any of the public agencies who said, we're not doing it this year anymore.
No, that's in a separate issue.
That's a separate.
Okay, so we'll take that. Thank you very much. Appreciate that clarification, although it was not on this item. Appreciate that. Mr. Zine.
Thank you. The concern I have regarding the foreclosures, the short sales, people in serious financial trouble, brush clearance isn't a priority for them, as other matters occupy their time and their finances. So when they're noticed, they don't have the funds to pay for it. The city goes out because of this hazard, and then we start to try and track the money. And I want to commend Christie for coming forward, bringing this idea to bring some end to it. And anytime the property goes through the escrow, all those documents. So what I hoped we can get is a report back from the fire department, how we can modify this process to explain in that escrow how it's done, to put it on the document, to put it on the paper, to put it in the file, so we don't have to go tracing the money or tracking the money or going through. Somehow that property is going to be owned by someone. Somehow when it changes hands, the new owner is not aware because of the system we've got. We need to update it so all the assessments, including this assessment, when it goes through the escrow, because eventually someone's going to purchase it. The other situation we just passed in council is on foreclosed property, where the banks are responsible to maintain the properties, because we have many foreclosed properties that start to attract a nuisance in the community and then downscale the community, the pride of the community. We now have an ordinance that I don't think it's signed yet, but that will require them to maintain the condition of that property. If not, it's a $1,000 fine. So the mortgage companies are one issue. The holders of the property, the banks, et cetera, they're the ones who are going to be assessed this fine, and they have to register that with the city. So when we go out and we do these inspections, and then we find that they're in violation, and we order them to clean up, and they don't clean up, and then the city cleans it up under contract, who's going to pay the bill? And we go try and track the money down. I think there's going to be more, just because of the financial situation many people are facing. But still, we're spending a lot of resources. So what I'm trying to do is get that money back into the hands of the city where it belongs, so we don't have to go through this labor-intensive task that currently exists. So what we'd like to do, as it's been explained, to make it simpler, to make it easier, and when you go through escrow, all those documents are there, and we want to include it, so it'll be a new process to streamline, shall we say, so we can capture it and hold the person responsible, because once that person sells that property or walks away, someone's going to assume responsibility. But then we have to go after the person. Well, I'm the new owner. I didn't do it. Well, we can't track down the old owner, and then obviously we have a problem collecting the money. Chief.
Well, and we share your concern over the information getting to the responsible party. The issue, we had a handout that we gave you that clearly delineates it's the responsibility of the seller to make sure that a 9A and to cover those fees for that discovery. The brush clearance unit is extremely diligent relative to the placement of those liens and pending liens through out of their unit and through their unit into, I believe it's Department of Engineering, that then hands it off to LA County to put it on the tax rolls. I feel that I'm very confident that the procedure that the fire department uses gets them in a timely manner to get them to get those liens and pending liens onto the record. I'm concerned that possibly there's a breakdown in other agencies that we hand off to get it onto those title searches in an adequate amount of time, realizing you're chasing a moving target as the property changes hands from the property owner back to the loan holder.
So how do we, because what happens is we wait to be paid while all interested parties argue over who's going to settle the lien. How do we streamline? Chris, do you have some comment on that?
I do, thank you. The 9A form you mentioned, currently this is the only place where these liens are showing up, and it's a little bit obscure. So what's happening is normally liens, any type of lien, would show up on the property's chain of title, which is a standard document that's pulled during the sale of a property. These liens are not showing up on the chain of title. They're only showing up on the 9A form. Some escrow and title companies are aware that this form is required to be pulled during escrow for the homes in the fire areas. However, many have never heard of this form before, especially if they're outside of the city of Los Angeles. In my case, both our title company and our escrow company were outside of the city of Los Angeles. So when I discovered this and did the hours of research to find out what's the simplest way to solve this problem, they all said, what's a 9 application form? I've never heard of that before. Why isn't this on the chain of title? So the simple nuts and bolts way to fix this would be to be sure that in addition to the 9A, that also these liens are showing up on the chain of title for a property so that they cannot be overlooked during escrow.
That's what we're trying to accomplish. I've read here about the 9A application, but apparently that's not working. And while it's being documented, we need to make it work. So what process do we have to adopt so it will?
I don't know if anyone's here from Bureau of Engineering or that we hand our liens off to.
Okay.
That's an issue that our responsibility is to get to figure out the amount, develop the paperwork necessary to submit it to the Bureau of Engineering, who sends it to LA County.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do, Mr. Chair, is to have a report back with the fire department, Department of Engineering, exactly how we can streamline this process to make it work, because currently, maybe you are the engineer who's now coming forward.
That's fire.
Oh, you're fire.
I mean,
That's a fire guy.
He looks like an engineer.
He looks like an engineer, yeah.
we work closely with the Bureau of Engineering. Randy Price, who's in charge of this process within the engineering, is unfortunately on vacation right now. His second McMahon was furloughed. So we're dealing with some staffing changes, Councilman. But to briefly summarize in our discussions with them.
You want to have a seat over here? Christie's giving up her seat.
Thank you.
Dr. Williams, this is clearly a reflection of age before beauty. You spoke first on this matter, by the way.
Sal Martinez, Fire Department. In our communications, though, with the Bureau of Engineering, in terms of the unit that handles this, we had identified our process. They had received it. They're the ones responsible for taking our information and ensuring it's in that 9A form, which they're responsible for. And there was some problems with not all of them being posted in a timely manner. I was hoping he would be here to, elaborate on that. But really, it's not a function of the fire department to input it in that data. It's really Public Works Engineering, and we really need them involved in this process to resolve this problem and to see how we can best correct it for our residents and for our property owners.
Excellent. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to have a report back from them. John, you have that?
Yes, sir.
And the fire department, so we can bring this back in. How long do you think that'll take?
Again, we can meet with them and confer, but I'd have to defer to them since it's their responsibility.
60 days. Okay, 60 days. Well, let's have this back in 60 days to this committee.
That should be ample time.
So we can get that resolved. Because I've sat on public safety for the last 9 years, and every year the groups come in contesting the fee.
Let's shorten that a little bit because that puts us in the council break. So why don't we have it back before 30 days? Be perfect.
Okay.
And be advised that those liens are still being processed right now by Captain Knight's staff. So it is an ongoing current issue.
Well, see, what we're trying to do is, they don't clean their properties. We know more, as you mentioned, many more are not being maintained, and I can see that getting worse, especially with the lack of water and the vegetation and the fires, et cetera. So what we want to do is make it work, and there's your expert behind you, Christy. She can be your consultant on this matter as a member of the neighborhood council. So
I also want to talk to Board of Realtors and because they deal with escrows every day of the week.
Well, the mortgage company, the escrow company, I mean, the whole assortment. What we want to do is we want to change it so it works, so it's easily identifiable. When you run those documents, this is what's owed on the property, and we can get it cleared up and who's going to pay for it. Whether it's going to be the bank, the mortgage, somehow we're going to need to collect that money without chasing it as we're chasing it, and somehow it's not all being collected.
And I just do want to reiterate, the fire department is doing its due diligence and transmitting that data in a timely manner.
Right.
It's really other parts of our city family that
It's
need
a
to...
it's systemic problem. We just got to.
It's part of the bureaucracy, the red tape. What we're trying to do is streamline that so we can get to the bottom issue. It's not that the fire department's doing anything wrong. Engineering may not be anything wrong, but the fact is, there's a gap. We want to plug that gap so we can make it more responsive.
It does take time, and you're pulling an escrow in that time.
And I'm sure there's going to be many more, and that's the thing. We want to be ahead of this. And I want to thank
We'll
Christian
miss
for
some in the short time, but we'll fix the problem.
bringing this forward from us from Woodland Hills Neighborhood Council. All right, thank you. That'll be.
Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it very much. That's 30 days. Item number 4.
Item 4, motion design Garcetti, instructing the fire department to report with a detailed inventory of all automatic external defibrillators in the public access defibrillator program and recommendations for the implementation of comprehensive tracking procedures for all related equipment.
And once again, this design motion, we do have one public comment, so we do the same thing.
Yeah.
Dr. Williams, item number 4.
Some people wonder why, sorry, Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Torino, Northeast LA. One of the reasons why I come down to City Hall is, hey, I'm a senior citizen. I have a defibrillator at immediate access. And trained personnel? That's the issue. Even within City Hall, does the General Services Department train its people in the use of the defibrillator? Do they train people in the use of CPR? This is one of the issues. I talked with one security guy, and he had been trained, but he wasn't in General Services. He was in another department. So one of the issues with the defibrillators is not only inventory them, but make sure that there's somebody trained to use them properly so that they can be used effectively. Thank you.
Doctor, to give you comfort, I am trained and I have one, so.
Me too, but I wouldn't put your life in my hands.
Nor would I want Mr. Zine resuscitating me, but that's another issue altogether. But we do have floor wardens wherever we have defibrillators. That's correct, Chief? Yeah.
Thank you, colleague.
All right.
Chief, go ahead. Mr. Zine.
Well, what we have is a situation, these are expensive units, $3,000 if I'm not mistaken, or thereabouts,
Underneath that amount, sir, but
underneath that amount, but somewhere in that vicinity. They're expensive,
they're expensive.
and they're stationed in different places, and apparently
Correct.
people move, relocate. You're the sole person in the city of Los Angeles that's responsible to maintain control and keep the list and coordinate training, et cetera. And I think somehow people really haven't taken that in consideration and left you wonder where these places are, or where these units are that are supposed to be at certain locations, and how we need to get more cooperation from departments and personnel as to the importance of the tracking, where they are, when the batteries have to be replaced, if they relocate, what we're doing about that. Anyway, you want to take it away, because you have a lot of expertise on this, and I know a lot about it, but you know much more, so you've got it.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Valerie Munoz, and I am the program manager for the PAD program. I am an employee with the fire department. I'm a senior management analyst. And this is Chief Norman. He's my battalion chief.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chief.
The defibrillators are, I maintain a database that tracks all of the defibrillators throughout the city of Los Angeles.
How many are there?
There are just over 1,200. The breakdown is, I have just over 900. We just released defibrillators to the seasonal pools, which opened last Saturday. So that increased my deployment. And I also have, the Port of LA has 35. There's 247 with Department of Water and Power and 111 with airports. And airports, there's 3 airports within that department, as you well are aware of. And the rest of them, all of the non-proprietary departments, locations, are managed by myself. Again, I do track them. I have a database. I track all the expirations for the pads, for the batteries that are in the units, as well as the 9-volt batteries that control the cabinets or of supplemental alarms. Some of our locations have an additional alarm that uses a 9-volt. And then I coordinate all of the replacements for all of the pads, batteries, as is necessary. The biggest problem, and the reason that I believe we're here today, Councilman, is because with the current financial climate of the city, I have been listening to news broadcasts as departments are closing. And when this started to happen, I thought, well, you know, first of all, I looked to see do I have anything with those particular departments and where are they located. The ones that I'm thinking about, we didn't have anything installed there, but it brought to mind that I'm never notified. I'm never notified if departments consolidate, if they move into new facilities. Case in point, and I'm not trying to put a finger in someone's eye, but Council District 9's office used to be on Broadway. I sent someone out there to go change out the pads and the battery, and that office was vacated, and it had a for lease sign in the window. They had relocated. I had to call, when they came back from doing field work, I had to call the council office to find out, where have you moved? They moved to Central Avenue. Okay, so we went out to Central Avenue, and we took care of the defibrillator. There was no notification made to me that they were moving, which anybody can move whenever they want, but we had a defibrillator that was now moved. It happens with the police department quite a bit. It happens all over the place. We have defibrillators everywhere. We have certain locations that move within themselves. When a defibrillator is deployed, there has been an assessment, and we've made a determination that X number of defibrillators are needed at a certain location. Case in point, the observatory. That's a part of the Department of Rec and Parks. Well, the park rangers are also part of that department, and they decided that they needed one of those defibrillators where they were. There was no conversation with me, and when I went to go check on that particular defibrillator, it wasn't there anymore, and it come to find out through many calls that the park rangers had it. The defibrillators need to be where they need to be, or we wouldn't have assessed that location to have that defibrillator. We also need to know where they are in case for doing periodic maintenance. You can't maintain something that you can't find. As time progresses, I'm become more and more aware of defibrillators that are out there that I wasn't even aware of in the first place. So that becomes kind of a problem. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. For instance, Griffith Park has an adult community center. I found out through conversations with Rec and Parks and the Department of Aging that 2 years ago, Department of Aging bought 2 defibrillators for that location. They never contacted the PAD program. So when I went out there to go check on them, the pads were expired, but the defibrillators were actively deployed, ready for use. I mean, you know, to be ready for use.
And if they were used and the pads were expired and someone had a medical emergency, then the city could be held liable.
Exactly. And that's my biggest problem is there are people out there in these facilities that assume that I'm aware of these defibrillators, but these defibrillators were obtained through sources outside of the PAD program. There was no conversation with the PAD program. If a location is a public access city facility, then we're supposed to be contacted. I'm supposed to be contacted. I go out and I check the location. I make a determination as to how many need to be installed and where they need to be installed. And then I'm the one that's responsible for finding the funding source and obtaining the defibrillator for that location and ensuring that it gets installed. And then I have a record of it and I can maintain it. When Department of Aging did that, there was no contact made to the PAD program 2 years ago. I was unaware that those 2 particular units existed there. So this kind of thing creeps up. And my biggest concern is again, the consolidation or movement of locations to new places, and I'm not in that chain to be notified if there's defibrillators so that they can be moved and so that I'm aware of where they're at. or
So
if
how-
they're expanding,
So how do we do a citywide inventory of the defibrillators, Rex and Parks Police? I know SWAT team has them deployed.
Fully aware of SWATs, because I worked with them on those, yes, sir. I kind of, my thing is that maybe we should have a couple of things happen. We should contact all the departments that I know have defibrillators and ask them to contact me back. I'm working with Rec and Parks on that particular issue. They're actually going out and doing a physical assessment of all of their locations, and then they're going to get back to me. They just need to tell me how many defibrillators they have and where the facility is. And that's a way I can double check my records to what they have. That's one source. But the other component to all of this is every department should have one, and I'm going to say entity as opposed to person, but there should be a designated place where they work with the PAD program. And that's the other way to keep apprised as to when locations are closing down or when they're opening a new facility or moving. We don't have that in place with every single department. For instance, the police department. I work with different people at different locations, but there isn't one person that would just call me and say, hey, we're going to build a new harbor station. We're close to completing it. Can you come out and assess it? That didn't happen when they opened Harbor, and everything was moved over there without being assessed.
Yeah, Mr. Zine, real quick, if I could, I think we can cut to the chase on this. There is one single source on any new facility in the city, and it goes through the Municipal Facilities Committee, which approves all the new construction buildings, et cetera, libraries, animal services, whatever, all go through that. And I think is it chaired by the CAO, Mark, or is it CLA? I think it's chaired by the CAO. Yeah. So if you contact the CAO's office, they're responsible for any new facility. The leasing agent would be General Services.
I contacted General Services, sir. They don't have one person.
No, that's why I said they're the leasing agent. So there's a bunch of people that work on leases.
Okay.
But if you want one single source in the city that approves any new facility, it would be the CAO's office.
What about existing?
Right.
Existing, now, they would have a list, and I know they have a list, because they've run it for us in Budget Committee of every property we have.
But when properties change, for instance, when Council 9 moved into a new
That
office.
would be municipal facilities under the CAO.
Okay.
So there really are 2 points of contact. Anything new would be the CAO, anything existing is the General Services Department.
But then how do we get Animal Services and all these other departments to give the information to the fire department so she can have when do we change them? When do we, the batteries and the pads? I mean, all those issues, there's a huge gap. And I can see a liability if a trained person were to use one and the batteries are expired and now the person
Yeah,
dies.
and that goes back to your motion, which is how do we fix where we're at the
Exactly,
moment.
exactly.
From the future, there are 2 contact points, and now you've got that. So any future activities and changes, those are the people who can help you. What you've got now needs some sort of an audit.
So, I mean, every city facility has them, I understand. Every city building?
Not everyone, no, sir, but almost all the municipal buildings, the major municipal buildings have them
Like Fig Plaza, does Fig Plaza have one?
on certain floors, not on every floor, because we have private
We're not on
businesses
every
still
floor.
in. That's correct, sir.
But the Public
Correct.
Works building would have it then, the one down on,
Yes, we do, sir.
Broadway?
That's correct.
okay, so how would it work for Mr. Chair to do, would we ask the
I
controller to
think
do
we
an
should
audit?
just ask the CAO to send a letter to every general manager, asking them to identify the location of all the pads that they have under their...
Are they numbered?
facilities.
Are those units numbered?
Yes, but you know what, they don't have to open them and get the serial number off the back or anything like that. They would just need to tell me the name of the facility and how many they have there. And then I could check my records, and if I'm not aware of it, I'll go out and I'll check them.
Do you know Mark?
Hi.
That's the CAO.
Okay.
He'll get together with you, write a letter to every general manager requesting the information you want back. Then you also now will have a contact at the CAO's office on the Municipal Facilities Committee, who can let you know, and they'll put you on a punch list for notification of any new leases, any new facilities that are created.
Okay.
Okay.
That would be great.
For a go-forward
So
basis.
do we want to get a report back to?
Yeah, I think we need to, when you get,
Compliance?
right, when you get a finalized plan.
That would help me significantly. I appreciate that. Can I respond to Dr.?
Sure, Williams.
Yes, Williams?
You don't have to, but you can.
Okay. The state of California requires that we do training at every facility that has the AEDs. We actually train more people than what the state allows. We train 5 people per defibrillator. So training does happen, and they're trained on CPR as well as how to use the AED. And the Philips AED actually is a great AED for a layperson that isn't trained. If they grab it and turn it on, it's actually going to talk you through it. And that's one of the reasons why we install that particular model throughout the city. So training does happen. Anyway, thank you.
Chief, anything else?
you very much.
No, sir.
Okay, very good.
So when do we want to report back?
60.
Oh, that was-
90 days? Is that sufficient time?
I'm sorry, 60.
90 days, is that?
90 days is
90.
fine. Do you still need my inventory, sir? Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate
Hopefully we'll solve that problem, and Dr. Williams, if you ever need help, stick around Mr. Cardenas, he has one in his trunk. I got one too. You got one too? Awesome.
But she don't know I do.
Okay, item number 6.
Item 6, communication from the mayor relative to contract extensions for various prevention and intervention services providers located inside and outside gang reduction and youth development zones and grid evaluation service providers, and the release of the 2011-12 request for proposals for prevention and intervention strategies.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm just going to, we'll turn this over to Mr. Cardenas. He's the eminent authority on grid and gang intervention programs on the council. Our council gang czar, I guess. Mr. Cardenas?
Thank you very much. Okay, I guess if you'd like to apprise the committee of the moving parts of this potential action, a lot of contracts, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Monique Schlickman, and I'm the Director of Planning and Administrative Services for the Grid Office.
Mildred Lopez, Associate Director with the Mayor's Office, Gang Reduction, Youth Development.
The Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development, or GRID as it's known, was established in August of 2007. And since its inception, the GRID Office has established 12 grid zones and 8 service areas outside of the grid zone. Through an extensive RFP and procurement process, we have partnered with 18 different agencies to provide intervention and prevention services throughout these grid and non-grid zones. Additionally, we procured the services of an external evaluator to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of the grid office's strategy throughout these various service areas. Today, we are here to request authority to negotiate and execute contract amendments for a 1-year term beginning July 1st, 2010, ending June 30th, 2011, with the following. Our 12 current providers to continue gang prevention services within the 12 grid zones. Our 6 current providers to continue gang intervention services within our 12 grid zones. Our 6 current providers to continue gang prevention services outside the grid zones, and our 3 current providers to continue gang intervention services outside the grid zones. Additionally, we're requesting authority to negotiate and execute a contract with the Urban Institute to provide comprehensive evaluation services throughout the 12 grid zones. The initial terms of the aforementioned contracts allow for options to renew for 2 additional 1-year terms after the initial 6 to 12-month term, and today we are requesting authority to enter into the final term of the contract. And as a result, we are also requesting authority to issue up to 4 separate requests for proposals for fiscal year 2011-12 for gang prevention services in the grid zones not to exceed $12 million, gang prevention services outside the grid zones not to exceed $1.2 million, gang intervention services in the grid zones not to exceed $6 million, and gang intervention services outside the grid zones not to exceed $900,000. Additionally, we are asking for authority to utilize $874,881 from the unexpended 35th year Community Development Block Grant funds allocated for gang intervention and youth development to fund the following agencies: the Soledad Enrichment Agency, Communities in Schools, and Tobin Neighborhood Services. We're also asking the city clerk to place on the agenda for the first council meeting date in the fiscal year 2010-11 or shortly thereafter the following instructions. Transfer $1,046,013 in the unappropriated balance fund number 100/5B account entitled Gang Violence Reduction Effort line item to the Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development, Fund 100/46, account 3040 Contractual Services. Contracts for the proposed contractors addressed in this transmittal that we're presenting for gang prevention, intervention, and evaluation services in the amount of $21,140,000 is available from the following sources. $15,634,823 is from the general fund, our budget for the 2010-11 fiscal year. The $1,046,613 unappropriated balance fund that I mentioned. $2,535,814 in grant funds, and $1,922,750 in general fund contractual savings.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before you start, can I ask just one question to John? You're requesting that after July 1 to the council to take up an action and move the UB money. I know we can't change the budget for the year until July 1. But if it was put in the UB, which is just an instruction to move it, can we do that now, or do we have to wait till July 1 for that?
The committee could do it now. Your report won't go to council until after the new fiscal year begins.
Okay, yeah, that's true. It's kind of a moot point. Dumb. Okay, thank you.
Well, they could have had a placeholder tomorrow in council, which is before the fiscal year.
What time is it?
No, not that we do. I said they could have put a placeholder prior to this meeting. Yeah, but that didn't happen. All right, which puts us over into after July 1st, which is the new fiscal year. All right. So it wasn't a dumb question. They could have had placeholder, but they don't. Okay. Thank you. I have some questions. First of all, when it comes to prevention contractors, they're servicing and tracking at least 100 children per grid. Is that correct?
It's actually 200 youth a year.
That's what I thought. 200. Okay, per year. And how is that tracking coming along, and where's the documentation of that tracking? I would imagine it goes from the providers to the mayor's office, but now what?
When you say now what, exactly, what do you mean by now what?
Yeah, what do they do with that information? Are they meeting their contractual obligation by tracking at least 200 children? I keep saying at least because I'm assuming that they don't stop at 200. All of a sudden, child number 201 comes in and say, you know, tough cookies, we're capped.
Correct.
Well, okay. There's 3 ways that we currently monitor our gang prevention agencies. First of all, we mandate that all of our prevention agencies track our youth through our web-based client tracking system, which is currently known as the Grid Information System.
And it's up and running?
It's currently up and running. All of our prevention providers are currently utilizing this system, so they track their clients on this system. In addition, we have internal staff within the mayor's grid office that goes out and monitors each of these clients in terms of service delivery, current placement within the programs, and access to services. So in addition to that, we have monthly reports from our partnership with the University of Southern California. They tell us how many, entries they have for using the youth services eligibility tool. We have an eligibility process, so it's not like they can just enroll kids into the program. They have to meet our requirements. So they give us monthly numbers as to how many kids have been accepted into the program, how many have been enrolled, and so forth. Do you want to add anything?
And now that once they've realized that they've been accepted, they've been enrolled, now that this has been ongoing for months and now over a year, what is that information used for? Somebody's going to write a book someday? Is it ongoing feedback to the organizations? Within that information, do the organizations report back to the mayor's office as to what some of the consternations might be, or some of the adjustments they would like to make based on the experience that they're having in these communities with these young people to hopefully increase their success rate? And also, do they also track whether or not the child, when they got enrolled, they had been a dropout, they got transferred to another school? Are they back into their original school? Are they back in class? Are they now doing their homework? What involvement does that report have on the actual progress of the individual children?
Well, the database system that Mildred mentioned, it's called GRIDIS. It tracks all the services that each youth is provided with. Additionally, it tracks referral services, so if a child leaves the program, where the child is being referred to and what type of services they're getting outside of the GRID program. Also, when Mildred mentioned our internal staff that goes out and visit the programs, that's some of the dialogue that we have with the providers in terms of what exactly is the status of the youth in the program. And we involved, advisory committees, like there are a number of meetings that happen at the provider level where we talk to the providers to figure out what exactly is going on with the individual children in the program. So it's not just numbers that they're reporting, but there's actual data on each child that's in the program.
And something new that we'll be implementing this year is the YSET retest. So initially, when the kids come in, we identify risk behaviors associated with gang joining. Every 6 months from that date of enrollment, we'll be asking the agencies to conduct a retest to determine whether risk behaviors have been decreased and there's an increase in protective risk factors associated with gang joining. So we can identify what services have contributed to what changes in the life of that child.
Okay.
And we'll be able to report that back to council in our 6-month report.
You took the words right out of my mouth. When can you report that to council?
Well, we report every 6 months, so we just started doing the retest, the pilot retest a couple of months ago. A full retest, we'll be able to report back January of 2011.
Okay. Okay. All right, so we'll accept that as a request and response from the council that on January 2011, we'll have our first full report on that matter? Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful.
That's correct.
Thank you. Also, in your request, there's a $900,000 contract evaluation extension with the Urban Institute, and you're stating that the Urban Institute has developed comprehensive reports on each grid zone. They provided those reports. When did they get those reports to the mayor's office?
They provided draft reports maybe a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, so right now they have draft reports, but they don't have a full report yet?
Not yet.
When do you anticipate them having a full report?
Okay. I know we're currently reviewing them now, so it can't be, maybe within about 30 days, they'll have their final report.
Okay. So do you anticipate that within 60 days you can report to this committee on those final reports? Would that give you enough time?
Yes, and we can actually have them report to you directly.
Okay. Now, if we were to hold off the future $900,000 contract with them until that report and review is done to this committee, would that cause any problems with the organization?
Yes, because the Urban Institute is involved in the retest process, and so delaying the 60 days until delaying the contract negotiation for 60 days will delay us being able to get the retest information to you by January 2011.
But it won't delay the report that you'll be giving us in 60 days, because that's all contracted with the first $900,000.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Well, there's other data that they're also collecting. So crime data to determine community level impacts and individual outcome data. So that would also be delayed as well.
So the report wouldn't be as comprehensive considering today's June 28th. So there's the data that they already have, but they're continually working to get more data to sort of make the report a bit more comprehensive. And so if we delay a new contract, that's going to affect that being a more comprehensive report.
Okay. But it won't, we shouldn't anticipate that it would delay any of the contract that we already have with them. That is a separate matter, right?
That is a separate contract, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, come July 1st, in order for them to streamline their ongoing research and information and ability to accumulate report information to the mayor's office, any delay in the contract, we would anticipate that would perhaps delay their ability to follow through on their timelines.
Correct. It'll completely come to a halt. Well, because we don't have a contract.
Well, we don't have a contract. We anticipate it would. I mean, with all due respect, a lot of wonderful organizations hold their breath and hope the government gets back around to their contract and they continue to do the work, obviously at their risk. Okay. But out of respect for the black and white of a contract, then we could only anticipate that they would have to stop. Internally, okay. In the San Fernando Valley, it appears that we don't have an outside the grid zone contract for intervention.
That's correct.
Okay. Any particular reason why that occurred back with the inception of the grid zones and the expansion of the grid zones, et cetera? I anticipate it was purely monetary, I would imagine.
Actually, no. My recollection is that we divided up the request for proposals into 4 regions. There was South Los Angeles, East and Central, West, and then the San Fernando Valley. It may have been that no one actually submitted an application. But that was over 2 years ago, so I would have to go back and confirm. But my recollection is that that's the way that we had divided up the regions. And so it may have been the case that no agency has submitted an application for consideration.
If the process provided for the funds for an outside the grid zone opportunity in the San Fernando Valley, is there an agency that you would anticipate you could extend that offer to?
Well, again, we're requesting authority to issue a competitive bid process. So it really could be anybody that was interested in applying for intervention funding outside of the 2 grid zones.
Okay, you're talking about outside the current
Yes.
grid zones in the valley.
In the San Fernando Valley. I would imagine that communities and schools would be applying for it, as they currently have 2 gang intervention contracts in the San Fernando Valley.
And you're just basing that based on the regional activities of the intervention providers throughout the city, right?
Exactly.
Okay, because they seem to be the only intervention provider in the valley that seems to continually interact with the city of Los Angeles and provide those kinds of services.
They're the only agency that I'm aware of that currently does this type of work in the San Fernando Valley.
Yeah, I agree with that. Not that there are or aren't, but they're the only ones that I'm aware of in the San Fernando Valley.
Some may have sprung up these last 2.5 years. We won't know until we issue the RFP.
Okay, all right. Now, in your presentation, you mentioned, and the chairman of the committee actually referred to the unappropriated balance amount. So based on the requests of all of the contracts that are before, potential contracts that are before us, it does include the $1,046,000 in the UB. So basically, it's anticipated if you were to be given the authority to contract the litany of contracts that are before us, that it's anticipated that the UB funds would be utilized for these particular contracts.
Correct.
Okay. Now, if that were not to happen, if a portion thereof of the $1,046,000 or all of the $1,046,000 were to be determined by the council to use for something else, are your contracts allowed to be adjusted as the year goes on if you have a shortfall in funding in order to complete those contracts for the entire 12 months?
There's a stipulation in the contract that it's subject to the availability of city funds.
Okay.
So we wouldn't want to do that, but yes, there's a stipulation in the contract.
Yeah, I wouldn't either, but, it takes a vote of the budget committee, and then it's going to take a vote of the council and agreement thereof for us to go ahead and move the money from the UB. That being the case, before I make a motion, I guess, Madam Perry, Councilwoman Perry?
Yeah, just in this, I may be wrong about this, but grid runs the summer night lights, right?
Correct.
Do you know which grid organization is over 50 personnel on South area?
Not off the top of my head, no. We could get back to you on that, though.
Because I don't know either. And, we had an event there, I think it was last week. Well, I have a conference space over there. And I'm really concerned about money for this event. They don't deal with way that's most leverage to benefit the greatest number of people. So I had an event there. Summer night lights had a kickoff event there. I circled back in there a number of times, and I only saw 4 people.
Okay.
And I'd like to know who's responsible for that area. And,
You said 51st and
Avalon.
Avalon.
Park.
I can guarantee you.
Yeah. I can't tell from looking at this list. It could be any number of organizations, but somebody over there, whoever's running it over there, they just,
If I
there's
could,
nothing going on in them. I don't know how much, but there was food, money being spent, but there weren't any people.
yeah, if I could just piggyback on that, I think one of the discussion we had during the budget was that the council felt they were left out of the loop on these kind of activities. People didn't know who was doing what. And the mayor vetoed, and we came to an agreement on how we would cooperatively work on this grid program. And one of it was to have better communication with the council on who's doing what in their areas. It appears that's still not the case. So I need you to go back and say, okay, whoever's doing the night light program, whoever's doing intervention program, you need to be coordinating, at least advising the council member of the district you're working in on what you're doing, because those people that have them, and I have none in my district, so it doesn't affect me, but those people, obviously, that have them are still not hearing what's going on. So
Absolutely.
if you would, please do that.
Well,
Okay.
go
I don't
ahead.
want to waste money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we put the money somewhere else, in a more effective way.
I believe what you're referring to is our Taste of SNL events that we're holding throughout the city. But I can find out specifically.
Yeah, I tell you, I went in there and I walked through there several times, and I never got more than 4 people.
Okay. I can go back and find out
Yeah.
who oversaw the South Park event and then get back to you on that.
Great.
Got a couple. The big issue for me is crime reduction. How does the evaluation show crime reduction or crime increase in the areas?
So in the transmittal, it states that the Urban Institute executed a memorandum of understanding with LAPD to acquire relevant gang crime data, homicides, aggravated assaults, and so forth. So in their year-end report, they will state per grade zone what gang crime levels went down, went up, and so forth. And so LAPD is reporting that data to UI, and that'll be revealed in the report.
Shouldn't we review those numbers before we continue contracting with the certain providers if the numbers don't show an improvement in gang activity? If it's showing just counter what we're trying to accomplish, if gang crime is going up, shootings, violence going up, why would we continue to contract with those same providers until we get that statistic?
Well, right now, it's too soon to tell whether we can attribute gang crime levels directly to service provision. The services that we're asking authority to renew have only been in place for 1 complete year. And so we're just beginning to collect and determine whether, our services, will impact specific, gang crime levels within a particular area. Each month, we're not waiting on evaluation results to determine whether we should continue funding these services. Each month, we get monthly crime statistics from the LAPD that lets us know where the gang crime levels are in each area. We're confident that we're serving the correct areas. The majority of them are in South LA, in the Watts area, 77th Division, Newton area, where a majority of the crimes are taking place. So it's not a matter of are we serving the right places. It's, trying to link up, whether these direct services are impacting gang crime levels in these areas. And I think, in my opinion, based on the evaluation results for year 1, it's too soon to tell whether, we're making impacts in these communities.
Okay, well, I think that if we're spending this kind of money, we should be able to evaluate within a year period of time if we've seen a reduction in shootings and violence. And if we haven't, I'm not saying we don't want to service those areas, but maybe we should
Right.
get someone else to bring in a different program than the program that's not proven effective. I mean, if you got something that's working, I agree with it. If it's not working, because we've had a lot of concern with gang programs in the past, anti-gang programs, a lot of them were taking a lot of money and not doing a whole lot of good. So we're very cautious about that.
And that's why I'd like the opportunity to bring in the evaluation team within 60 days to report on those outcomes.
Okay.
And also, Mr. Zine, one of the things that is very, very different than how perhaps a policing agency looks at success or not, is that when you deal with intervention prevention, it's exactly that. You're actually preventing things from happening. So how do you score that? How do you say, well, we had a bunch of kids who were going to do a shooting, and an intervention agency stop them from doing that, retaliation shootings, but you do have the first death, the first shooting. How do you measure that quantitatively like a police department would by saying we had 22 shootings in the month of January in this area. We had 6 deaths. But how do you quantify and qualify intervention, prevention, things that didn't happen?
Well,
So,
I think you can make the comparisons.
But the thing is, there's comparisons and there's correlations, and there's attributing the results to those particular actions. And with all due respect to policing agencies throughout the country and throughout the world, usually the response to more crime is we end up throwing more money and more bodies at the actual problem, even though it escalates. So in this particular case, which is a complete paradigm shift, is where you're saying we want to throw dollars and a modicum of dollars because of our police department. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Smith, you're on the budget committee. I think the police department, all told, when it comes to general fund and grants, they exceed 1.4 billion. Yeah, you know, in excess of 1.2 billion for sure, maybe a few hundred million more. That's what we're throwing at the problems of crime and prevention and intervention via the policing agency of the city of Los Angeles. And here, we're only talking about putting less than $25 million into the most comprehensive intervention prevention package in the country. So, again, you have more crime, the police chief rolls 50 more bodies out there, you know, over the next 30 days or what have you. When you look at intervention prevention programs, you have an incident or some crime or what have you, they don't get to throw 50 more bodies there. They just have to keep marching forward with the resources that they have. Again, we're comparing apples and oranges if we only want to evaluate success or not of intervention prevention programs based on only crime statistics. And then when we get the report, we're going to be able to have a robust discussion about what other factors they're using in order to evaluate. And that's something that we all have to take a deep breath on and say we have to look at the world a little differently because we can't just look at it as crime.
Well, I disagree. I think crime is the key issue when you're talking about intervention, prevention. You're trying to intervention and prevention on crime. That's what your goal is, to prevent crime and to prevent retaliation when it comes to crime. The whole issue of gang intervention is to have intervention so the gang member doesn't go out and commit crime. And if we get them on an even keel on something positive, that's great. I just want to make sure we're using the right programs with the right vendors to solve the problem that we have. And I used to work 77th Division. I know that there's a lot of poverty, there's a lack of jobs. I understand all that. My concern is we're investing. What we want to do is turn it into a positive environment versus negative. A couple more questions I have. How many folks do they have in the gang reduction and youth program out of the mayor's office? How many folks involved in that? Such as you.
How many staff on payroll in that department within the mayor's office?
There's actually,
Yeah, how much grid staff, internal staff do we have?
36.
36.
And that includes accountants and things like that. It's not just people out in the field, right?
Correct. Well, there's 27 grid staff that include program monitors and program managers that oversee each of the 12 grid zones.
Would you call those mainly field-oriented individuals?
Yes, they mainly are out in the community and also assisting agencies in implementing programs. We have 5 SNL staff, so these are 5 full-time people that conduct the planning and implementation of the Summer Night Lights program. And we recently inherited the Young Women from Adversity to Resiliency staff.
Okay.
So that's a total of 36.
And they monitor to make sure the programs are doing as they're supposed to before they do the evaluation that's going to be conducted.
Correct. Evaluation is separate, so there's an independent evaluator that conducts the program and process evaluation.
And then talk about intervention, prevention. What about programs like the Boys and Girls Clubs or the YMCA? Do we do any intervention, prevention with any of those organizations, Boys and Girls Clubs throughout the city or YMCAs throughout the city?
They're not our direct contractors, but that's not to say that some of the prevention intervention contractors aren't working closely with them as collaborators.
Okay, I'd like to find out if we are, because I know that YMCA has a lot of folks that are participate in their programs, the youth programs, the swimming programs, et cetera. I know they're looking for funding, and also the Boys and Girls Clubs. We have a number of Boys and Girls Clubs that are always looking for funding. They serve those communities to get them involved in something positive, to see if we have anyone outreaching or any involvement, either Boys and Girls Club citywide, YMCA citywide.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll find that out. We can also make an effort to notify them of the request for proposals that's coming up.
Also, Mildred, when it comes to YMCA's and Boys and Girls Clubs, are they more likely to engage in some fashion on prevention or intervention programs?
Prevention, absolutely.
Yeah, because
Prevention.
intervention, you're dealing mostly with involved gang members, people who perhaps already have a criminal record, et cetera. Those tend to be the people serviced 90-some% of the time with intervention programs, correct?
Correct.
And prevention programs are more the at-risk youth, the perhaps the kid who's getting involved in gangs and what have you before they escalate into that higher level of activity. They tend to be addressed through prevention programs, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And also on the Child and Family Guidance, I've got one in my district, non-grid in the Valley.
Prevention, yeah.
Child and Family Guidance Center.
Correct.
Whatever programs they're involved in, I'd like to find out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I know they exist, but I don't know they were part of this.
They should come pay you a visit.
They were actually the former LA Bridges provider in Winnetka.
Okay.
So they had a contract for 10 years prior to this.
There's a lot of controversy about LA Bridges. You bring that up.
Okay.
Yes.
I have
They
one
are
more.
a strong agency.
I have one more question before I make my motion, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned earlier about the subsequent budget year, 2011-12, and wanting to put together an RFP for prevention and intervention and four more prevention, 4 more intervention RFPs, or what?
So 4 separate requests for proposals. It's the same structure that we have currently.
Okay, so it's the current 12
Correct.
plus the outside grid zones.
Correct. So the 4 is the 2 prevention, 1 internal, 1 external, 1, and then intervention, 1 internal, 1 external to the grid zone. So that's why we're saying up to 4.
Okay.
So there's a prevention grid zone.
Are you going to realign the current zones, or what would you be doing differently than what we see today?
It won't be
It
different.
won't be different.
We currently have 12 grid zones. In each of those 12 grid zones, they have $1 million worth of prevention, $500,000 in intervention. We're going to move forward with those. In addition to that, we have non-grid zones, which we break up into regions, which I mentioned earlier. So there should be a total of 8 additional outside areas.
Okay. All right, so basically that notation shows us nothing different than what we have today.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. All right. Now, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do is amend the report by taking of the $1 million per grid zone prevention contract is to adjust it by $20,000, adjust it down to $980,000 per prevention grid zone, which are 12, correct? Or 12. What that would do is that would take an opportunity of that $20,000 per 12 zones and free up $240,000 so that, and then instruct the mayor's office to go ahead and put together a contract for the San Fernando Valley for intervention of $240,000 outside the grid zones in the San Fernando Valley. Obviously, if nobody wants to take it up, if there's no opportunity for a provider, a qualified provider, to go ahead and take up that responsibility, then you could come back to the council and notify us of that, and then, well, we drew a dud. But the reason why I say that is because I've been listening to my colleague in the Valley, Councilmember Zine, who has Alabama and a few other folk out there in the Canoga Park area, which are definitely not, they don't rise to a hot spot to have its own grid zone, apparently, but certainly we could have a little bit more attention across the Valley so that areas like that can get qualified, perhaps a qualified good vendor to go ahead and have the resources to attend to those matters outside the grid zones in the Valley. Yes, Mildred?
Can I just say, when we issue the RFP, there will already be $225,000 open for the San Fernando Valley.
Okay, so you
So there
already
is
have
no
money
need
set
to
aside
reduce,
for the
correct.
San Fernando Valley? Because I'm looking at
Now,
the list, and we have Toberman, Venice, and Public Health are non-grid zone intervention agencies, but I don't see a list for a contract outside in the Valley.
correct, and that, my comment earlier was because, I should go back and confirm this, was because no one had actually applied for the San Fernando Valley. Now, keep in mind, we're
But apparently
going,
what you just said, which I'm not arguing with you, let's clarify. You already seem to have the budgeting and authority to go ahead and have
this year.
a grid zone in the San Fernando Valley. It's just that up to this moment, you don't have a provider identified to sign the other half of the contract saying, we will be the provider.
correct.
So the
So-
the 225,000 is where then? It's still then sitting in the UB for it to be transferred?
No. What we've done is we've used it to provide services in South Los Angeles by the Toberman Neighborhood Center. So this will be the last year that they will have that contract. So what I'm saying
Okay,
is.
so that's the 450,000 to the Toberman Center. So you're saying this year, 2010 and 11, right now, it is your intent to only contract them for 225,000?
No. What I'm saying is, the total non-grid intervention is $900,000. This will be the last year that Toberman Neighborhood Center gets two contracts, two $225,000 contracts. In 2011, 2012, we'll break it up into regions again, and one of those regions will include the San Fernando Valley, which will include a $225,000.
Okay, which is back to my motion. My motion is trying to address the potential of contracting with somebody sometime after July 1st, 2010.
I'm talking about you're saying you want
I
to
want
go
I want to
ahead.
see, I want to see Mr. Zine have more services in the valley, outside the grid zones, which are mainly servicing the 6th and the 7th district, to be able to have the opportunity for you, the mayor's office, to contract with somebody
For this year.
starting after July 1st.
Okay, so.
Therefore, that was my motion to adjust.
Okay, so my request is that you give us the opportunity to find those $225,000 for the San Fernando Valley without impacting prevention service providers.
How are you going to find it?
I was just going to say,
we have
you're
grant-
opening up a Pandora's box by wanting to go try to find money that we've
I'd like
delineated
that.
in budgets that are already line by line.
But there are grants that we have in play right now. I'd like you to give us that opportunity before cutting into prevention.
I'll give you two places, the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, both serving the Canoga Park, Reseda area.
But see, they don't
We
do
have
intervention,
some-
they do
So
prevention.
they do intervention. Intervene before you commit a crime.
No, trust me.
Yeah.
It's a different intervention, not the gang intervention.
Will you guarantee that you will find that money? Because here's the problem. Once we commit, then you can't go back and undo it.
Then we do have to wait till 2011-12.
No,
And I don't want to argue
that's
about
what
it.
I'm saying. Like, I think we can, I'd like for you to give us that opportunity to find it via grant funding.
Between now and the time we have it on the floor of the council, can you do that?
I think we can do that. Yes.
Okay, because we can amend it on the floor of the council,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, without impacting prevention contracts.
Okay, so
Why don't
what,
we could include an instruction from this committee to find it by that date, or else
Exactly.
we will take it back out of this.
so I amend my motion.
It's a risk you take.
That's fine.
I amend my motion to say what I just said.
Yeah.
If the mayor's office does not return with an identifying amount of dollars to satisfy that intervention outside the grid zone intervention contract in the valley,
Correct.
And
by the time we get to council.
you're stipulating 240,000, whereas the other contracts are for 225.
I know,
Yeah.
but
You want-
It's
15,000.
an easy number.
You're okay with.
There's no law that
225?
requires us to be at 225. And the valley has over 1 million people anyway.
We'll
And
take 2 and a quarter
geographically,
if
it's the
you
most
bring it
spread
to
out
the
area.
Well, I think
We'll make a deal for 2 and a quarter if you bring it to the
if we.
I
come
can
back-
adjust the amount when we get to council.
Okay.
I think we can find 225,000 for this year for a non-grid zone in the valley.
Just warning you, Mildred, next time I want some money going to the valley, I'm just going to ask you, and you're going to say, well,
You're putting-
wait a minute, last time, Mildred, you said that you could find the money.
Now you're laying yourself
See?
up.
I think we can, based on some grant funding that we're expecting.
So maybe you want to add a caveat. I don't think we can do that over and over and over in a budget year, but perhaps
We
once we
can't.
probably could.
This is a
A
special
one-time-
year.
Yeah, so that's the caveat you might want to add to that.
One-time deal.
Yeah. Put an asterisk on that.
Okay, so that works?
All right. Okay, yeah, that works.
Everybody satisfied with that?
Yep.
Okay, that'll be the order then. Move to council. Thank you very much for your cooperation, and let's get those lists to the council members so they know what's going on, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8?
Item 8, or 7?
Which one? I'm sorry.
Both will remain.
7.
Item 7, Department of General Services reports relative to the security of photocopiers and fax hard drives used by the city.
I think we'll move this quickly along. Good morning, how you doing?
Good morning.
Notes, here we go, all right. I think you've made good progress from where we were a couple of weeks ago. We're identifying the problem. I think we can just instruct GSD and all city departments to classify photocopiers according to GSD classifications and instruct the GSD to report back within 60 days on the number of machines that need DOS feature. Does that work for you? Is that good? You understand?
I'm sorry, I'm not.
Okay. I was going to suggest, and if everyone agrees, that we instruct GSD and all city departments to classify photocopiers according to the GSD classifications and instruct GSD to report back in 60 days on the number of machines that need the DOSS feature. So we're going to say, you guys have not classified everything. Departments tell us which fit that classification, and then we'll figure out how many need the DOSS software, how many don't. Does that work?
Yes, sir. Actually, we've done some review, and we've...
Your name?
I'm sorry. Michael Malinak, Department of General Services. Based on our research, we've determined or believe that there are approximately 950 to 1,000 copiers that fall into the Group 1 or Group 2 classification.
Which means how many don't?
Approximately 500 to 550.
So excuse me, Mr. Chairman, so two-thirds basically fall into that category?
Correct.
Right, about 1,500, about 1,000, so basically two-thirds?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, so we know that number now, then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we should then instruct you to report to the Budget and Finance Committee on the cost factor of installing that DOSS software on all those that don't have it now.
Well, Mr. Chairman, according to the notes here, was it a guesstimate, or is it a pretty firm number of $250 per machine?
It's actually closer to 275.
Okay, so at closer to 275, let's just say it's average or what have you, and then times 1,000, just add 3 zeros. So basically, we're looking at a budget of about 275,000.
Yeah, correct.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I might ask, now, if we were to identify the funds and instruct, and people were to go out there and start to retrofit those machines with the DOS feature, how long does that take roughly?
The information we've received from RICO is that with their current staff, it would be several months. However, they've committed to provide additional staffing to bring that time frame down to approximately 2 months or less.
2 months or less?
Correct.
So 60 days or less?
Correct.
Okay. So is this going to go to Budget and Finance?
Yeah, we'll just recommend budget.
Try to figure out where to get the money.
So that would be the recommendation then, Mr. Cardenas's recommendation, that we send that dollar amount to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Yep.
And request them to figure out where the money comes from.
And for clarification, it should be 275,000, hopefully or less, but basically
Approximately.
275.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, great. That goes forward, the recommendation of the committee. Thank you very much. And that takes us to item number 8. Thank you.
Item 8, Department of Animal Services report relative to improving and streamlining dog licensing regulations and processes in order to achieve increased revenue and higher rates of compliance.
So these are all those things that Ms. Doherty's been telling us for years we need to get done, right? All right.
And we're just about there, council members. Linda Barth of the...
All of them?
Actually, that's why you have this report before you. This is Linda Barth, Department of Animal Services. This is a follow-up report to some reform legislation that is already in the pipeline that you've already approved. Specifically, these are some the actual setting of the late penalties and the time frame for that from 45 days to 30, and setting a penalty, a 15 or soon-to-be $20 dog license, the penalty would be $20. A $100 dog license, the penalty would be $100. Also giving a $5 discount for people who buy a 3-year license up front, so that hopefully just a little bit of a, motivator to get them to do that, which will be good for us in terms of saving labor.
Mr. Chairman, I know I don't want to sound tongue-in-cheek or what have you, but if somebody gets a 3-year license and the dog passes away, say in the first year, do they have the right to come back to, no?
No,
So
they
basically they're committed. It's basically...
That's correct.
Okay.
Got to get out there with your defibrillator and keep it going.
No, but the reason why I asked that is because it's a budgeting matter. It's great to get, somebody to say, sure, I'll give you 3 years worth of my fee, less headache, don't have to remember every year, all the reasons under the sun. But from a department budgeting vantage point, it's one thing to receive money and then have to cross your fingers, hope that no animals die, and then the people don't come to the counter and say, I just want to let you know that my animal passed away, so give me my $50 back.
It's very explicitly, in fact, one of the small little technical recommendations is to tighten the language to make it clear that there's no refund on licenses under any circumstances.
Because people will assume that they can.
And we'll try to make sure that's clear in the documentation. That's the good side of a 3-year license is they don't have to worry about it at all. They have a 3-year rabies vaccination. They don't have to worry.
And when can people start getting the 3-year license?
After all of the legislation is approved by City Council and the municipal code is revised, so hopefully we're hoping September sometime.
Okay.
In fact, we would like you to move this forthwith so that we can get it through council, and City Attorney's been working hard, so he just has to sort of finish dotting the i's and crossing the t's with this action.
On the budget issue, let me ask you then, let's assume we get a lot of people doing this. We budget on a year-to-year basis. So now you're getting money up front for future year revenue streams that now are going to drop off. Are you impounding the money and holding it, or are you going to spend it in 1 year and just automatically instruct the CAO to reduce your revenue stream the following year?
In fact, we will recognize it as revenue in the year that we receive it, so we would get 3 years.
So
What we would do, yes,
downward
we would calculate. What our hopes are is that through the use of online licensing, which all this legislation will help us achieve, that we will just overall increase our licensing stream. There will be a lot of dog owners who will choose not to, even though it's not a lot of money, they will choose not to license the dog, just as the council member suggested. The dog's older.
Yeah.
So we think it'll give us a little additional cash flow this year, but we will calculate then taking that into account in future years.
And average it out.
If it becomes a big number, you might find that it was a surge up front, and then it becomes to hurt you later on, so you've got to be careful with that.
Yes.
All right. Sorry. Anything more?
No,
Okay.
unless
So this is just an
The
instruction to the
$500
city
civil
attorney.
penalty, what is that?
It's not a letter.
No, go ahead.
I'm just saying from a technical point of view, this is just an instruction to the city attorney to finish.
Committee members, you have a choice. This can go to council as a request from you to the city attorney to draft the ordinances, or I can send a letter on your behalf to the city attorney. Then when the ordinance comes in, the ordinance goes to council. Typically, we do the
That
letter.
would be faster.
Yeah, it's faster to do it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we should do that and put in very bold letters, this is urgent, which means the city attorney might get here this year.
We hope so.
The elimination of the $500 civil penalty?
Yeah, the civil penalty has been in the code since rabies vaccinations. Since rabies vaccinations became something that was required in order to license. It was meant to be very punitive. Certainly in the last number of years, it has not been exercised. It requires quite a number of steps. Before you can actually get to the collecting of the $500, there's quite a number of steps of warnings and letters and collection things. What we found is that it's not effective in getting people to license, which is the goal. Because what it does is it convinces people to hide their animals and to remove them from the city. And that a simple penalty, which is a motivator to take immediate action, is going to be the way the city is going to achieve improved licensing. But this big stick that hangs out there has the reverse effect. That's been the experience of the department for a number of years. And having it out there is not something the city attorney is willing to prosecute because it's not a large enough issue, and it just hangs out there and it doesn't accomplish anything.
And then the 50% discount instead of seniors and low-income individuals not having to pay, what's that?
The City of Los Angeles is one of the last remaining jurisdictions in California which doesn't charge anything for seniors or disabled. Now, I'm not talking about service licenses. Service licenses compliant with ADA and so forth, those would still be free. But most jurisdictions offer $5 or $10 off or a half price senior disabled license. And given that the average processing cost for a first-time license is about $4 or $5, it was our sense that at least being able to recover costs for the first-time license and ongoing basis was appropriate, but that a discount is also still appropriate because we're talking about low-income seniors.
Okay. And basically, there's no reason for us to believe that way of doing business is not working in other jurisdictions. Seems like that seems to be the norm in other jurisdictions, and they seem to be comfortable with it.
That appears to be the norm for many, many years in other jurisdictions.
Okay. And then my last question, Mr. Chairman, is what's this about, establishing an amnesty period? For how long, or what's the purpose of that?
What we'd like to do is to work with a nonprofit organization, Found Animals, who's stepped up and has already committed to do a big launch of the online licensing. Once our legislation is finished and the legislation at the state level, which, by the way, has been approved unanimously by both the Senate and the Assembly and is now on the governor's desk, and we're hopeful for signature soon. And that legislation is to allow jurisdictions to determine how to prove rabies vaccinations. So that instead of a written certificate with a signature, we can do some sort of electronic approvals or verifications, and that will allow us to do online new licensing. So what we want to do is a big launch, and we want to combine the fact that we have online available with an amnesty period for the penalty of maybe 30 days, so that what we can do is really do a big advertising push and drive a lot of people to that online system, get a lot of people enrolled in the system first time.
My last question. Thank you.
Ms. Perry? Okay. So the recommendations that go to the city attorney, and there's a lot of moving parts here. It's going to require numerous ordinances or just one big?
The city attorney has been working on an omnibus reform bill.
Okay.
So, and we've been working very, very closely with him, but he did need an instruction from council in order to be able to bring something final back.
And who is that who is it you're working with?
Dove LaSalle?
Doug, let's see, Dove, just so we can direct it directly to Dove, or copy it to Dove and send it to the city attorney as the proper way to do that.
Yes,
So that'll be the instruction from the committee, and please.
Do you have the speaker's card in the side?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry. Yeah, and so that'll be the instruction with the, please, this is an urgency, so.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Doherty.
Thank you.
Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement. Thank you so much. You remember when you were a deputy, I was bringing in some of these things about puppy registration and 3-year license. That was a long time. And I just wanted Linda Stayer to thank you so much for approving it and for the hard work that she's done on this to put together the entire package, because we have to create owner responsibility for animals. When an animal attacks and does not have a license, we have no way to assess liability and responsibility. There are just so many aspects of this, and even though rabies has not been an issue since the 1940s, late 40s, 50s, when they started animal control, I'm researching an article on it now, which I think you'll find interesting, and back in the early 1900s, it even portrays how people at the 2nd Street Bridge were running up on the sides of the hill to get away from the rabid dogs. That was a Los Angeles Times report. So this is how bad it is, and even now, just today, I read an article yesterday, and I can't remember exactly what country it is. They've had 37 human deaths from rabies this year, and thousands of animals that have died. And the problem now, and the reason that this is particularly important, is with this import of dogs that we're getting, or any other animal, two things: the imports that we're getting, which will come from those countries where they are not vaccinated, and also the wildlife encroachment, where you have the interaction, coyotes, skunks, bats. This is a way that of course, we can contract rabies into our domestic population. So it's vital that we assure that the dogs and cats, we need to work toward that. I think that there's something in the motion right now to work toward getting cat registration of some kind and a guarantee of rabies for any animal that goes outside to make sure that everyone's protected. I just can't thank Belinda enough for the hard work she's done.
Phyllis, you meant us encroaching on the wildlife territory, not them encroaching on us.
Well, yes, but they're.
I think we've been pushing on them for a while.
Yeah, we are, but the problem is that they're pushing back.
Yeah, we're making.
So as long as we were just moving. Yeah, as long as we were just moving there and we could, we're living together, but people actually are inviting them in, so they're coming in and becoming, part of the whole scene now.
Yeah. And with big fires we had last year, a lot of coming down out of the hillsides.
Pardon me?
With big fires we had last year, a lot of coming out of the hillsides into the domestic areas.
Yeah,
so.
Driving them down, and it's a shame. And please just don't, in the future, please just don't let anyone come in and change laws and change our licensing. Our licensing differential has been the most singular, most effective thing we've had in controlling population for pets and reducing the euthanasia and the impound rates and everything. And Linda really has her finger on the pulse of that.
Thank you very much, and stay right there. That concludes item number 8, and you have your instructions. We have public comment. Phyllis Doherty.
Thank you.
Yes, public comment. I will not be able to be here on July 12th because I will be in court on a cockfighting case. And so I can't miss that. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you may have seen my article that I wrote on the background. I understand that's the day that the person that's proposed to be the general manager may be coming in. And I just wanted to speak to you about the issues that are involved that are so serious, is that working in a humane society, and especially having been a breeder for many, many years, and the representative of the AKC for legislation, is such an entirely different philosophy and way of life. It's not something that you can just automatically move over to going into a law enforcement municipal animal control agency. When that has been your life, the fact that PetPac was on her Facebook, the thing that her favorite, PetPac is the organization that supported the lawsuit against us for our spay-neuter ordinance. It's Mr. Hemby. These were outspoken. They went around and opposed it everywhere. There's several things that are concerned. I won't have a chance to say this. The Ed Musica person that is promoting the ADLLA right now, and by the way, you're going to be getting calls from the ADLLA people, not just because they support this, but because they are being told. I think I gave you a copy of to make 3 calls per alert that they send out to every council office. So this is not like people are just voluntarily supporting. And Mr. Musica, who has this on his blog, and this is the recommended person, is the person that put up an entire blog to defend Ed Boakes. Everything he did, they admitted that was the purpose until he got angry at him, and then that changed. So I just want to mention that no-kill and breeders' philosophies have certain things in common. No animal limits, that she may try to move away from that. We must not allow 5 to 10 dogs per property, no more than 3. No licensing, that they do not enforce licensing. She's not doing that in Seattle. No mandatory spay-neuter, and no breeding permits. Now, she may not be able to go to that extreme here because we have those things in place, but I just want to alert you that those are also things that are in common with no-kill, because the basic line of no-kill actually supports the breeders, and what it does is keep the animals out of the shelter. It's not that you kill less because you're eliminating the problem. It's because by imposing all of these things, you don't bring the animals into the shelter, therefore the problem does not show statistically. It does not work on the problem, and what you're doing here right now does.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Hurst.
you
Appreciate
very
your
much.
input always. That concludes today's meeting. Thank you very much.